Even though we've only had this property for about 4 years, we've had goats on the property just about as long as we've owned it. One of the hardest lessons we've had to learn is having a proper fence or pasture set up for them. We're still not to that point yet, but we love having the goat milk so much that we've maintained the goats by having runs built for them. Just imagine a heavy-duty dog run, but for a goat. As you can see, we had one set up here. It goes between two trees that are about, I'd have to say, 80 to 90 feet apart. And on this braided wire, we had another braided wire as a lead that the goat could go up and down with. As you might be able to tell, this area has been well picked through, so today we're going to move him to a new area. If you're looking to get into goats, or you think that you might want to take your goats on chains through your woods to try to help clear things out, one of the things I have to stress with you is not to underestimate the power or ingenuity of a goat. Our dairy goat is extremely smart. She has figured out how to get through the gate on their pen many times. It has to remain latched, or otherwise she knows exactly how to push her weight against it so that it will spring backwards, and then she will skinny herself through the open spot and push it open and get out of the gate. The same thing can be true when it comes to using these chains. You cannot go skimpy on these chains. You cannot just go into the pet section and buy a little dog chain rated for a 90-pound dog and think that that's going to hold your goat. It will not. I have proven that by experience. You have got to take yourself to the hardware store and buy these thick 3/8 inch braided wires if you're going to have any chance of having these wires or another thicker chain hold onto your goats. It's also pretty obvious that these wires are going to snag. You can just picture your goat walking through the woods and wrapping around trees, and you having to take care of them more often than not, being able to just leave them alone, which is kind of a point of this. We don't have fences up, and we want to be able to just let the goats be out, give them the basic needs of keeping them water, putting them in shelter when the weather calls for it, but otherwise low maintenance. So don't rely on substandard equipment that's going to break on you and all of a sudden you have your goats in your garden bed or somewhere else. What I'm going to do here is cut this run in half so we can make two different runs. The point of having the run is it keeps the chain up off the ground a bit, so there's a lot less snagging. Rather than having just one chain getting drug around the woods, they can have a run to go on, keeps the wire up off the ground as they go across the run. So in order to do this, I'm going to take this electrical tape. I've already measured off about a 25-foot long section. I'm going to spin this electrical tape around here a couple times. This braided wire will fight back on you very quickly without any regard, and you'll find yourself biting your own tongue just to try to keep back the language. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap this a few times so that when I cut into it, I don't have as much fraying take place when I cut this wire. This is going to seem a little overkill. I had a pair of snips that would cut this. However, one day while doing a similar project, they managed to be the one tool that got left behind, and they have since disappeared. So I'm actually going to use a Dremel tool with a bit on it that is made to cut through the steel. As you can tell, that worked out really well. We got a nice clean cut through. The electrical tape has held that in place. I'm going to take another piece and kind of cap off the end of this so that we don't have any fraying in the near future. Certainly can't say that this is going to last an extra long term, but this will help not only for your safety but also for your animal's safety. You can just imagine that if you don't want those little strands of wire poking you, if you have this end ends up being the piece that is up near their neck and it frays, you're just going to end up having cuts wearing away at them. And that's not how we want to get our animals, how we want to take care of our animals. So now we're going to turn these into loops so that we can put a appropriate clasp on it and go attach this to the tree where we're going to put him. Then we're going to string up this run back to another tree where we can put our girls. Okay, so now we're going to attach our clasp onto the wire that we're going to use for our male goat, our Billy. One more point about quality. You don't want to use the kind of clasp that comes as a, well, I'm just going to call them a pet clasp. They kind of have a little slider on the side in order to open them. Your goats are going to be rubbing up against trees, bushes, and everything else, and all it's going to do is eventually snag and open that. And as your goat tries to get free from whatever it's snagged on, just by Murphy's Law, they're going to find a way to get that loop to come off their collar and hightail it. So you're going to want to find a clasp like this, where you have to reach in and open it like that. It stays flush on the outside, so nothing for it to snag on. It's also just flat out a heavier duty clasp with a heavier buckle on it, so that that's not going to come loose. Whatever you have, even if you're not able to, you don't have one of these laying around, or you don't have the couple dollars to go buy one at the store, make sure it swivels. That's just one more thing that's going to help this lead last a little longer for your goat. So in order to do this, obviously we're just going to slip this in here first and leave enough of a loop that we ourselves aren't causing enough pinch that we're going to end up snapping these wires and causing them to fray. So I'm going to bend this backwards here. Sorry about the break, had the camera shut off on me there. All we did was bend that wire backwards onto itself. I left it's about a 10-inch loop. The reason we do that is to make sure that by creating this loop we're not pinching the wire ourselves, which will eventually over time lead for one wire and then another to break and eventually just splay the whole thing open and cause a way for our chain to get off. If you haven't used this before, it's a pretty simple concept. This clasp, just it's got two pieces along with the nuts, one on each side. It just creates tension. You just screw these nuts down on top of it and it creates enough tension that the wires can't come loose. Where we have had chains fail before, it has never been at this location. It's always been because the goat managed to get caught on something where it twisted around enough to fray on a much lighter duty cable, or because we used the wrong kind of clasp and it was able to get opened and just came right off the collar. So now we're going to take this chain over to where we're going to attach him to the tree and do this again on the other side and put him out to pasture. Here's a quick look at what you don't want. This is the kind of latch I was explaining usually comes on the end of a pet lead. As you can see, it's got a little spring-loaded latch with a bit of a trigger handle on the side here. It's supposed to be spring-loaded. It should say stay shut in this position, and then you would pull it down, take the animal off and let it go back. But as you can see, this one here has been pulled back so many times and damaged that the spring has been worn out, and an animal could easily get their collar right through there. So this is what to stay away from. Do not use latches that have something on the outside in order to pull it down. Make sure it is flush. Okay, so here's a case in point for you about the pet tie-outs. This was a failed attempt to try to put out a 100-pound goat on a pet leash. this is just not going to work. This was a matter of what we had available at the time. The wire you saw me cut was something we've had around for several years. It cost us about $100 to get the length that we had, and it's kind of been one of those mental blocks of mine where I just did not want to cut a length of that off. I wanted to keep it whole. However, when we were getting down to this, you could just see how twisted up it is, where he's gone around vines and just around the cable itself, wrapping itself around, that has caused all of this mess and eventually leads to a failure where it snaps off and you end up having your goat at the front door trying to deliver you little goat pellets, and you're wondering why in the world he's not where he's supposed to be. So this is out the door. Now we're going to attach our more heavy-duty system, which has proven itself in the past. We're just going to make many small leashes rather than have one humongous run.